what I've observed is that 60 and 70 today is not what 60 and 70 was in your parents' generation.
Totally. People just need, that little tip that you just gave, Briana, about, you want me to just tell you where it is, or you want me to hold your hand and walk you across? You know what I mean?
What went well, what didn't go well, what would I do differently, knowing what I now know, and if I was going to advise others, what would I tell them?
Welcome back to She Means Millions. We're going to dive into a topic that has come up a lot on stages, and we've never done a podcast about it. And I think that it is overdue. So let's talk a little bit about, there's this really interesting time that we're in right now where eWomenNetwork, being 25 years old, has cultivated an audience that's really grown up with the fearless leaders, our founders, Sandra and Kym Yancey. And so we have our core demographic who are also in that same category where now they're at a stage in business where the conversation is very heavily focused on, their legacy and their exit strategies and their succession planning and all of the pieces that come into play with that. And then also we are in a stage where it's like, okay, well, as this audience reaches that point where they have succeeded or exited or built their legacy, how are we going to start to bring in the generation that can now grow up with us yet again? Mm-hmm. And so it is interesting how we're bridging that gap. I feel like we've been very intentional about it. And I think that it would be fun to have a little bit of a conversation about that. So why don't we start back in 2000 when eWomenNetwork started and your headspace when you started the company?
Yeah, I mean, the truth of the matter is we were really attracting at the time kind of that generation that we were in, kind of between 35 and 45.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough. And of course, as we have aged, so has the generation. And some of that is, a big blessing because we have members that have been paying monthly members for over 20 years.
Yeah.
Which, in and of itself is relatively unheard of.
Unheard of, yeah.
In the membership-based, community. So, but that is indicative of what you're talking about right now. They've grown
with you.
Yeah, grown and grown up.
Yeah.
With us. But you know what? I'm thinking you've also been in, Briana, in eWomenNetwork for about 10 years, 7 years formally, but, informally, 3 years even before that. And you've grown up.
Yeah.
I mean, you're now 35 years old.
Yeah.
You're not the 25-year-old, right? So,
totally different space.
It's interesting to see how, as you evolve, right, how, what is your strategy around the attractor factor? Who are you attracting as prospects in? And how are you adjusting? And you had such an important word. It's not one or the other. It's bridging. I loved when you said that because that's really where you are. You're in that constant. If your business is successful and grows over time, you're going to be constantly bridging new people coming into the space.
Yeah.
Yeah, listen, as the audience has grown, I've told people, don't ever use the retire word around me. I mean, I don't want to talk to you if you want to talk about retirement because that's not any part of my vision on a personal level. And I think a lot of our members feel the same way because they're evolving. They've done this research with Life Reimagined. I remember that
Yes.
landmark research. And people think of, you get to this certain age, you say, okay, I've hit it. Now I'm going to slow down and retire. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There are a couple of key triggering.
You start getting things in the mail when you turn 50.
Yeah. And
as if you're like getting ready to slow down. Today, it's just a different environment. People are really ramping up.
Yeah. I mean, AARP is the magazine you hate to get. When you know what I mean? So, it's almost, I mean, everybody who gets in the beginning says, why are they sending this to me? You know what I mean?
Well, they are in a reimagining phase of their company too, because it's shifted.
But the point for me is that our audience, along with us, I don't think even for the most part, while we've had some conversations about transitioning in terms of selling your business or whatever, of course you can be any age and sell your business, 30, 40, whatever, people are selling businesses all the time.
Yeah.
But I see this energy among our members of people that you might be thinking about selling, but they're like energized because things are happening so quickly. New things are being invented. New strategies are being deployed. I mean, obviously when we started, there wasn't any social media, for crying out loud.
Alone AI.
And people are like, "Oh my God, you were around before social media?"
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, wait a minute.
I know.
I mean, I can't quite relate to that level, but I do feel it when I go to buy, let's say, a bottle of liquor and I have to show my ID and they glance at it for a second. I'm like, you didn't even look at my birthday. They go, oh, I saw the 19.
Is in the 19, like you were born in 19, whatever.
The 1900s. So you're definitely over 21. I'm like, oh my God. I wasn't prepared for that. Tatiana and Brian are going to be like, my parents are so old. They were born in the 1900s.
I just pulled out my driver's license and they said, sir, I don't need that. I said, you sure? I just want to make sure in case you asked a question. I thought you might want this. Yeah. I just came prepared.
Yeah, it's crazy. Just the psychological between the 1900s and the 2000s, right? But yeah, what I've observed is that 60 and 70 today is not what 60 and 70 was in your parents' generation.
Totally not.
What my mother thought, how she processed information, what she looked like, how she carried herself at 60.
Yeah.
Is polar opposite.
I mean, I remember just looking at baby photos of me with Grammy and realizing, oh my gosh, Grammy is the same age in this photo as my mom is right now with Tatiana. And Grammy, she kind of
was a Grammy.
She was a Grammy. She adopted that as her entire personality, and she really shifted into that whole look. And I've just noticed even this generation doesn't use the terms Grammy, grandma, grandpa. They're like, nope, I'm not a grandma.
Exactly.
I'm not a grandpa.
Exactly.
I'm a lovey. I'm a peppy. I'm a nona. I'm a papa. I'm a honey, a glamma,
right.
a Gigi,
a Lola, or Lolly.
Yeah. It's interesting because there is, I think, an entirely different mindset that this generation has, which is really cool. I think that a lot of times when I see younger women try to come into this organization with like a little bit of an air of like maybe cockiness, it's almost like a condescending tone, and it's really disappointing because I'm like, God, there's so much wisdom to be had.
And can I just say, Briana, conversely, I feel like there are a lot of people that have been around for a while, been in business for 20 years, and some can almost roll their eyes when the younger group comes in, not realizing there is so much to learn from this generation.
Or they'll look at them and not roll their eyes, be like, oh, honey, let me help you. Let me mentor you. And that could be a really beautiful thing. I don't want people to stop doing that. But there is also an element of, maybe you should be taking some notes. There's some tech savviness that the younger generation brings to the table that could really run circles around a lot of you. And so there is, I think, a mutual beneficial relationship
for sure
within eWomenNetwork, which is what I think makes us so special. When I go to other networking groups, it's very clearly all millennial Gen Z or very clearly all Gen X and Boomer. And I haven't really encountered any organizations that have really successfully cultivated both. And we definitely still do lean more heavily towards Gen X and Boomer. No doubt about it. But I'm noticing more and more millennials coming in, millennial managing directors, and it's really exciting to see that kind of pivot start to take place.
You know what's driving that, don't you? Their birthday.
Yeah.
their birth. They're getting older too.
Yeah.
They're moving into our key demographic. They really are. They're moving into it.
Yeah.
And after you've been out there with your business in your 20s and you're entering your 30s, you really start to get serious and say, not that you mean to be serious, but you get serious at another level. You start paying attention at a whole different level. There are things that just seem like good things to know, but then you start to practice what you're really hearing, because your revenue is not maybe consistent, or you're
Yeah.
not closing the deals that you want to close. So all of a sudden now people are keying in at a deeper level to understand. Personally, I love what I see, observing and watching our older members and our younger members, and that convergence of intellectual exchange is pretty impressive. Because Sandra, I think so much of it is the way you teach your philosophy, with the engagement with all the members that you have, like in your SOAR program, the different things that you do. I mean, you're constantly pushing, like, engage, get involved, constantly.
If I were if I were 10 or 15 years younger today, I would be strategically,
Yeah.
I would be all over finding the groups that were 10 or 15 years older than me.
Yeah.
For one reason, there's many reasons, but a good solid reason is they often have the discretionary income to invest in bigger programs. So depending on your price point, right? I mean, let's just be really clear. As your kids get older, you get a raise. You were just saying, just getting your baby, Bryant, who just turned a year old, out of baby food.
Yeah. It's a race.
Is a raise.
Yep.
And guess what?
And when he gets out of diapers,
It's a raise. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, bigger kids also come with bigger price tags. They need cars and car insurance and things like that. But generally speaking, you're also earning more,
Yeah.
right, as you're growing your business. Conversely, if I were in my 50s or 60s, I would be networking in organizations that had a younger demographic. Why? Because I know that everything is moving digitally. They've grown up, so they have a little bit more, I think, of a comfort zone, a natural, kind of instinct to embrace. They're using a lot of the latest and greatest tools and techniques. And I would want to be leaning into that and saying, what is your favorite tool for, editing video content? Or what is your favorite way to, take something that you've done like a podcast and repurpose it 3 different ways? And I would just be asking questions that is so easy for them to address. And I think the faster, right, because we're already moving at the speed of light right now, the faster you can acquire wisdom, not just knowledge, because to me, success isn't about how much knowledge you have. If that's all it took, Google is free. We could all be doing searches for days into Google, or now ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or whatever it is. But the truth of the matter is, the real magic, I think, that really translates to making the cash register ring is leaning into the wisdom, right? I would rather lean into you, Briana. What are the tools that you're using that have produced for you, than just going and doing a generic search and having them pop up top 10, list of tools. But I don't know anybody that I see having success. I want to know, which one are you using? And it might not even be one that made this top 10 list.
Yeah, for sure.
So many advantages to making sure that you're networking strategically into both groups, and you're not just identifying where you are comfortable, because success is not about being comfortable. Success is about getting comfortable with the discomfort of having to make moves, having to make decisions, being in places and around people that might be not naturally comfortable for you, but might have the very answer to the thing you need most.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of the younger women too, when it comes to tapping into the wisdom, like there are certain things that, you could probably do some Google searching, some AI, and figure things out. But what you can't figure out, I think, like one of the areas that I was burned, and thank God I had great resources to help me navigate it, was navigating bad business relationships, bad partnerships. There's just a wisdom when you've been around the block, when you've been through it, when you've, encountered a bad partner, when you've made a bad deal. That's earned wisdom. And if you can lean on somebody who's already been through it before you have to make that costly mistake, then do that. You don't
Yeah.
have to figure it out alone. Just to have somebody that has a little bit more business maturity, that has navigated bigger deals, bigger relationships, bigger contracts, that you can just say, hey, like, what do you think about this? Or what's your read on this person? You don't ever want to underestimate that. And that is something that you can't just Google.
Yeah.
You can't just search it on AI. You need to lean on people that have actually been there and done that. And there's certain things like that technology will never be able to replace.
Yeah.
Is that negotiation
Yeah.
savviness.
Do you feel like you're drowning in your business? Like you're doing everything and something has to give, but you're afraid it might be you? What if I told you there's a network of over 500,000 women entrepreneurs, all dedicated to supporting each other? A network of women helping women. I'm Sandra Yancey, founder of eWomenNetwork, and I'm inviting you to join us and become a member. eWomenNetwork.com. We can't wait to meet you.
Yeah, life is filled, honestly, with mistakes
Yeah.
along the way, and lessons. Lessons are repeated until learned, because you'll keep experiencing the same thing over and over again if you don't learn from the lessons. Right?
And learning never
Ends.
never
But those,
ends, right?
but it's interesting, Brianna. You are so right when it comes to mistakes. We could all sit down and talk, and everybody would have a story about an error, a mistake. You know what I mean? And what did they learn from it? I know for me, that communication is so vital, especially written, clarifying communication, that really underscores the points of the things that you need when you're negotiating a contract. But we'll do a show on contracts probably.
I mean, you are the GOAT. You can read a contract and they are long and they are tedious. And it's not the kind of thing that you want to just run through AI and say, summarize this, because it will miss really critical, costly things.
Yeah.
And I'm just so grateful that I've had your wisdom to tap into, to understand how critical it is that you not only read it line by line, but you understand it. Because sometimes these little legal jargon lines can get kind of confusing. So to take the time to understand each little action that you're reading, each section, each amendment, all of the things it's just so I can't emphasize the importance enough. I have been burned too many times, and I wish that I leaned on my elders more.
Well, I love this conversation because so many times people want to find the recipe for the wins, right? And I do think that being in business over time, you really do earn your stripes, and some of them aren't stripes, they're scars. I mean, there is an element that if you've been in business for a while, you're going to be used, abused, screwed, and sued. You know what I mean, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you want to. What are the things that you can do what are the lessons that you can learn from other people? And we've been really lucky. I mean, we've definitely been, I think, used and abused and screwed for sure. You know what I mean? Those are, those
Passage. That's passage.
It's a passage in many ways, and the question is, what do you learn from it? Your plan, do, review. You plan things, you do them. They don't work out as you plan them to be. And so taking the time to do that review and what went well, what didn't go well, what would I do differently, knowing what I now know. And if I was going to advise others, what would I tell them? I think is such a valuable part of being, having a network and learning from the things that didn't go well as trying to always obtain the tips for making quick wins.
Yeah. One of my favorite analogies that you, Dad, ever shared with me, I think I was a teenager and I was trying to navigate something on my own, and I was really resistant to getting advice and just wanted to do it my own way. And you sat me down and you just said, listen, I want you to imagine that this journey that you're about to embark on is a landmine and there's bombs all over. I could either just let you go and figure it out on your own and hope that you don't step on a bomb, or I could just give you the map and tell you and point you in the direction of the best way to go. Or, having been through it before, I could take your hand and I could walk you across to make sure that you get there safely. Which would you rather choose?
Wow. You remember that.
I do. I never forgot that. It's
Great
really
advice.
powerful because when you think of your life and your decisions and how you want to move, are you letting your own pride of wanting to prove yourself and do it yourself cost you potentially your life, your business, your happiness, your joy, your bank account? I mean, or would you rather just be told what to do, or would you rather link arms with somebody that has already been there, done that?
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the power of eWomenNetwork and our core values of lifting as we climb and, fostering prosperity, growth, fiscal responsibility, but the teamwork to make the dream work piece.
Yeah.
And we really do live that value. And I think that our community is so rare in that you can come regardless of whatever stage you're in. In some cases, it might be the younger person that has the way through the landmine. And in others, it's the Gen X or the boomer. But no matter what, we're not going through it alone.
Yeah. Do you think, as you're talking, I think about the culture and the community that we create. I think about like the conferences. Now, this would be an interesting question for you, because I think my perception is that we do a good job as a membership organization at embracing the younger, what do you call what are you calling the younger? Millennial, and embracing them and welcoming them into the network. I don't know if the younger group embraces the value of our older members.
Yeah, I think it's both. I do think it's both. I witness both sides. I feel that sometimes I've witnessed some of my millennial peers that will dip their toe into eWomenNetwork and then they don't come back because they're not seeing the value in some of the content or the conversations. But I feel really sad for them because what they're missing is really the whole opportunity to reverse engineer. Sure, maybe you're not thinking about an exit strategy right now, but how great is it to start with that mindset?
You're right. That is so powerful, because the fact of the matter is all of us need to have businesses that are viable.
Yes.
Ultimately, if that's just not your bag, you're an artist, you're going to paint a painting a certain way and you don't care about scaling, whatever the case may be, things are different, but when you look at it and say, is this something that someone would want to buy? Have I created something that is viable?
Yeah.
It changes the lens for which you look at it and the way you operate within the business, don't you think?
No question. And the one thing that we all have in common is that one day, we're all not going to be doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
And so that is a level playing field. And so the question becomes, are you beginning with the end in mind?
Yeah.
And are you thinking about, when I am complete, whatever phase of your life that might be, what am I going to have to show that has some equity value in what I have spent my life, or a good part of my life creating? Because it could be that maybe you don't sell your business, but maybe you sell your intellectual property. Maybe you sell your program to someone else. Maybe you now start licensing it. Maybe someone buys your list. There are elements of ways in which to sell components of your business, if not the full business. If your business has been built around you as what we call attractive character, meaning, the face of the organization, there's still pieces of your business that when you don't do it could be of value to other people. And if you could begin with the end in mind, I think you make different strategic decisions on how you prepare for that day and get a payout.
Yeah. So I think that if the younger women were to come in and really look at everything as an opportunity to look ahead and to not have to navigate things the hard way or make mistakes because they weren't listening to somebody else who's already been there, done that. But then also the Gen X and the boomers, I have gotten feedback from some of our emerging leaders, for example. We at our international conference, we always honor emerging leaders who are between the ages of 22 and 29. So now that's Gen Z.
Yep.
And what I have noticed is that sometimes these women, they're brought in as emerging leaders because they're kind of crushing it.
Crushing it.
Like they're really killing it in their business. And sometimes because of their age, there's an ageism factor that really works against them. And so it goes both ways
Yep.
where, sometimes somebody isn't really looking to be mentored. You can't force it onto somebody who doesn't want it.
You're right.
And so looking down on somebody because they look younger than you, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're less experienced. Sure, they might have fewer years, but they might have some pretty amazing credentials that you wouldn't know about
Right.
unless you asked the question and really got curious. And I think that ties into the whole networking conversation that we're going to do an entire episode on.
Yeah.
Because you have to get curious and get to know people before you just start volunteering your wisdom.
And I think that's the difference between contacts and connections.
Amen.
And, there are people that go into networking events to build their list, to get business cards, to, start, hitting people up with various different types of emails and funnels and that kind of thing. And then there are those that slow down and know that the ultimate compounded value of meeting people is building the relationship.
Yeah.
And that takes time. It's never going to be a one-off conversation. It's not going to be once, twice, 3 times. It is showing up consistently, right? It's almost like dating, but in a different form or fashion.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to really make some investments, and some will and some won't. And so what? Someone's waiting. Not
Yeah.
every relationship is going to bloom. It's I always think about, remember when you were little and we always did I would buy the egg cartons that were cardboard and fill them with dirt. My mother did it for me. And then we would put the seed in. So when you were first planting flowers, and, you put everything out in the sun, the whole carton goes out in the sun. There's 12 little, where eggs were. So little opportunities to grow flowers, and you water it all evenly, and some never sprout, and some sprout in the very beginning and take root. And then some you get a twofer, it splits and you get 2 flowers. And I think of networking like that. I mean,
Yeah.
you gotta pour into it evenly and trust that some won't sprout at all, but some will become incredibly valuable for your life.
Yeah.
And you can't go in and pass judgment. You've got to contribute all the same and trust the process.
So true.
And we're such a society of, closure and transaction, and great relationships take deposits in order to reap rewards.
Yeah.
I think it's also important that people, many, see, it's really different when I start talking about eWomenNetwork versus other organizations that I see, because I see our members as being, wanting to learn, wanting to stay up with the latest, so to speak.
Question
and,
about it.
and they're more discerning too. Like, I don't have enough time to do all 4 of them: TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, whatever. Maybe there's 1 or 2 that they spend most of their time with. But the point of the matter is, I think it's very important that you're always reaching. And I see that. I mean, what excites me is I see our members that are in their, 60s and older even, but, 50, 60, reaching.
And 40s and 30s,
You're just reaching, because content and the flow of information is so fast. I was telling Ryland, I mean, one time our son, Ryland, said to me, "Dad, hey, when do you think you'll be slowing down?" And I said, "You'll be waiting forever to see me slow down." I mean, it's not about that. I love what I do, and I'm learning every day. I'm invigorated every single day. And it's important to know that people just need, that little tip that you just gave, Briana, about, you want me to just tell you where it is, or you want me to hold your hand and walk you across? You know what I mean? People are looking for solutions, and it doesn't matter what age it is. And I think the more you reach out and just say, "Listen, I see you here. I see you in these places. I wanted to introduce myself, and I wanted to learn a little more about you." I think we have successfully really created an atmosphere and a community that really thrives on that, don't you?
I also think that we're not trying to be all things to all people. I think when you try to speak to everybody, you speak to nobody. And I think one of the things that we've had to make a decision to do is that we're really looking at the business owner that wants to operate as a CEO. And there's the difference is, do you have your toe in or are you all in?
Yeah.
Right. And there are business owners that are kind of dabbling. There are business owners that are, hobbyists. There are business owners that are looking for $500, $1,000 extra a month, and then there are those that
Wanna
really,
grow a successful 7-figure and beyond business.
yeah. And I think that we had to get really clear around what our messaging, our training, our infrastructure, our support system, all the things. Who is our true right fit client? And that's why I think it's so invigorating now, the environment that we've seen just such an explosion of memberships, both online and in live events. And I think it has a lot to do with people saying, oh, this is my tribe.
Yeah.
I found my home.
And that's what's interesting about that is the clarity on who we're serving is that specific entrepreneur. And that doesn't discriminate against age.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
You could be a rock star 20-something-year-old who has clarity that this is what you want to build. And if that's you, then you're going to really resonate with eWomenNetwork. And I think it just really trickles down to, how we show up. I think since I've become more of a face in the community, I do think that I've noticed a shift in the respect level for more of the younger women.
Yeah.
One of my favorite memories was before I was part of the quote trifecta and I was a makeup artist. And I remember I bought a booth at the conference.
Yeah.
I was doing makeup and I used to love it because I went by Briana Dai back then too, but people didn't know that Briana Dai was actually a Yancey.
Right.
And so people would
Day is your middle name.
Dai is my middle name.
Yeah.
Briana Dai is my middle name. We talked about that on another episode. And so go listen to that origin story. But the point is, I used to see people's true colors because they didn't know I was Sandra Yancey's daughter or Kym Yancey's daughter.
What was that like?
Ooh, I got to see some sides of women, man, some great sides. But then there were definitely the people who, would talk down on me because I was, just a makeup artist, or they would talk down on me because I was in my 20s and I was like a cute little girl, not viewed as a business owner who, paid with this booth, who's offering services that you're paying. You know what I mean? So it was fun because I used to love to kind of it was like secret shopping.
Yeah.
And I could kind of come back to you and be like, oh, this person is actually not a very nice person.
And then we would do our Femtor Awards and they would see you on the stage because you've been on the stage since when?
Yeah.
How old were you? 10?
Yeah.
11? 12?
You're like young.
Yeah.
Very young. Yeah.
Helping, at least starting out with passing the awards and that kind of thing. And then they would see you. That was when we would do the awards on a Saturday night. We would close the conference on a Sunday back in the day. And then suddenly they were like,
Oh, crap.
oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. And then they'd come back and be so buttery sweet. And I'm like, okay, sister, I got your number.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember. But, but there is.
It's a lesson, though.
It is
There's a really valuable embedded lesson. Sometimes you just really never know who you're talking to or who they know, which could be connected to the very person that could change your life.
Yeah. We really care about our team. So our team always comes back to us and lets us know how they were treated and who treated them poorly. And I think that it's really important that you take note of those people.
Yeah.
Because that's information. And, you want to hire, fire, promote people in your life accordingly.
Yeah.
And that goes not just for employees, that goes for just relationships in general.
Yeah.
Sure.
Great conversation.
So good.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited for the next one already. So until then, I just want to close by saying, she does not just mean business.
She means billions.